Hello, I'm Steph from iDriver Classic, and today I'm back showing you a vehicle which is far more luxurious and perhaps special than some of the everyday motors of yesteryear that we've recently been testing. Today we're out in a Bentley S1 from 1955. Now, if you particularly like this vehicle today and wish it was on your driveway or in your garage, then despair not, because this is actually for sale. We've borrowed it from Bidding Classics and it's coming up for sale with them shortly. And all the details are in the description box below, including a telephone number and email address. And in fact, Bidding Classics are coming on as a channel main sponsor soon, so all very exciting. However, going back to today's video, let me tell you what's in store. We're going to have a look around the outside, in the engine bay, in the interior, and we're going to get up close and personal with the car, and I'm going to tell you all about the Bentley S1, how it fits in for motoring at the time, and then we're going to take this incredible car out for a test drive. So first of all, let's kick off with a walk around this Bentley S1. Now, before I begin telling you about this car, I wanted to express thanks to Dr. Andrew Roberts, who has generously shared knowledge and literature on this vehicle to enable me to create this video with a strong level of accuracy. Although if I've got anything wrong, do let me know. Now, coming back to the Bentley S1, or as some call it the S, we cannot begin talking about this without talking about Rolls Royce, because of course it was Rolls Royce who in 1950 decided to begin work on the Silver Cloud, which ultimately led to the S1 that we've got here today. Now, Grylls, not Bear, led up the project, and he was the future chief designer at Bentley, and he was given a very thorough brief on his design for this car. Now, one of those elements was that the car needed to use the existing 4887cc engine, or some know it the B series engine. Now remember that B series straight 6 was an engine first brought to life in the early part of the 20th century. Now, we talk a lot about brands using engines which are tired and past their sell-by date, but this was still a really good engine, and in fact it was very much loved by the British military, and it's used in a lot of British military vehicles, so it's really not something to be sniffed at. Coachwork, however, was slightly different. It was a little bit more fluid, and Blatchley, who I think was in his first year of his role as chief stylist at Rolls Royce, created the coachwork, which was constructed from 20 gauge steel on a box section, and it was reportedly 50% stronger than the Silver Dawn. The car uses its predecessor coil and wishbone front suspension, but with something slightly new. You've got a semi-trailing configuration to increase wheel movement and a new rear anti-roll bar as well. Now, after 5 years of careful planning and work, the S1 and the Silver Cloud debuted in April 1955, and it marks an important point in the joint history for both brands, with the Silver Cloud being the first Rolls to share exactly the same engine with its Bentley counterpart. But what's in a name? Because I know that you're going to ask me about the price. Well, it's about £135 actually, because the Rolls Royce came in at £5,079 and the Bentley was a bargain, £4,944, or as I later in the video round it up just to £5,000. Now, to give you a bit of appreciation for what that buying power gave you at the time, that £4,944 is roughly 4 times the cost of a Rover P475 of that year. But what of this car that we're testing today? Because of course a lot can happen in these passing decades, and this car has nearly 70 years of adventures under her belt. Well, first of all, she comes armed with a giant suitcase of paperwork. I probably could have made an hour or 2 hours of video showing you all of that, because the car was owned by the same person for over 50 years. And as you go through the car, and we've tested it today and have driven it, there's a really familiar level of high-end, consistent good work across the car. And I mean, when you look at the bills, it's got loads of stuff from really high-end repair shops, and the respray as well, because you've probably clocked it's had a respray, has been done to a really high standard as well. There's not any faults as the paintwork as you go through it. Now, a bit of sleuthing online will show you the car is first being registered in 1961, and I did question that if you're wondering that as well, but this is due to the car first coming over from Ireland and being re-registered. Apparently it had an amazing registration in Ireland, which was RI something something. Now, with over, I think it was just over 3,500 of these were made, it's not surprising that I've only ever seen a few in the flesh. But for me, it's definitely the nicest of the bunch, and it's refreshingly honest as well, because everything's documented. The bits that need sorting out, like the wipers, are all pretty straightforward. You could get it sorted out, and it's, as you see here today, there's nothing nasty being hidden. But what about the interior? Well, let's flip in and I'll talk you through what controls you've got, and I'll talk you a little bit about why you might see a change between the front seat and the back seat. Now, a wise man once told me, well, a few wise men have told me, that there is no such thing as a cheap Bentley or a cheap Rolls Royce. And at some point in its life, somebody has really spent some decent money on this car, which is very evident from the outside, but really once you get inside as well. So one of the things that you may not have noticed when we were walking around is those bumpers have been re-chromed. Both front and back have been re-chromed, and they look really tidy, because that's one of the things about these cars, is that anything with chrome on, as soon as that chrome starts to decay or look a bit ropey, it really drags down the whole car. And interior is kind of the same sort of bag. So when you jump in an old car, sometimes a weathered interior can look quite charming, something like a Morris Minor or an old Austin. But when you jump into a Bentley, you're expecting something to be a lot more together. And somebody spent really good money on this, and they've had a really good trim job done on it. Now, we've been out in a few vehicles, and I'm not going to name them because I don't think that's very nice, over the last few years that have been retrimmed, and they have not been done well, or they've been done to that period standard, so they end up looking a little bit out of place. But this has been retrimmed well. So the back seat, as you've probably spotted already, is original. That hasn't been retrimmed, which I'm not really surprised at, because the back seats haven't been that hotly used in this. And at some point, the front seats have been retrimmed, and there's receipts for all of this, but there's loads of receipts and I've not been right through the pile. But they've been retrimmed well, because the colour match between the front and the back seats is very, very good. And because it's not been freshly done, they've started to weather slightly. So the variation between the front and the back isn't that different. And so therefore it all blends in quite well. Now, one of the things, if you've seen my Triumph 1300, you'll know that these wood finishes can start to look quite weathered by this point, especially with this being from 1955. Now, this has all been redone as well. So coming inside here, we're probably testing a vehicle which looks to the condition that it's probably very close to what it was when it was new. So it's quite nice to take this out, really. Now, as we look inside here, you'll notice that there's not too much, but there's just enough to enjoy the driving experience, because we're still in an era here where people were being chauffeured. They weren't necessarily the drivers themselves. So let me show you what controls we've got on offer. Well, first of all, we've got a glove box over here, plenty of room inside, and of course it is lockable as well. So it just meant that if you were handing the keys over to somebody, everything is safe inside there. Now, your controls here in front of you are all relatively straightforward, and they're all discreetly laid out. I hate an overcomplicated dash. It can really ruin a car, and in this there's enough, but not too much. So let me talk you through what we've got over here. So you've got your temperature gauge, a fuel gauge, a clock in the middle, the oil pressure there, and you've also got your ammeter. And it's all contained within one dial. It's not, if you look at some of the later cars, you start seeing little hodgepodgey dashes, dials everywhere, and it can ruin the look, I think, for a car that otherwise looks quite sleek and refined. Now, jumping over to the right hand side here, that's your speedo. Now, it goes up to 110. I think the manufacturer advertised top speed is 103 miles per hour on these. Coming in the centre here, you've got another circular dial, and that's just your lights control and your key there to start. Over on the right hand side here, you've got your cigar lighter, and this little clip here, that's just to open the fuel cap. It's quite cold, so I'm not going to flip it and open it, but it all works. Coming down here, you've got your demist switch and you've got your wipers there. And on the right hand side, you've got the main light control. So to get all this to work up here, you just have to switch this on down here, and you've got your heater control there as well. Now, if you've ever watched an I Drive a Classic video, you'll know that I'm quite passionate about radios being left as they are and not having some god-awful modern headset thrust into a space where it shouldn't be. Now this is really nice because you've still got your medium and long wave radio, and eagle-eyed viewers will spot this and you'll be like, Steph, what's that for? I wondered that as well. This is actually to wind down the aerial, because remember, this car is 5'4" high, well, 5'4" high, so it's taller than me essentially. And this just winds down the aerial. So if you're going into a low garage or you're going into one of these NCP car parks, you can just wind that down and it won't catch on anything. So that's great. And you've got your speakers as well hidden behind the mesh. All in all, it's just incredibly classy and very well laid out. Now, the one thing I will say is that a lot of people ask this and they're like, oh, these never seem to be manual. These were never fitted with manual and it wasn't really offered as an option. It's auto as standard. Now, I believe this auto box is GM derived. Now, the one thing I will say is that there's a few optional extras that you might have seen on newer examples of this, because remember, this is a 55 and then there were optional extras brought in for 56, I think 56 for America and then 57 in the UK market. Now these options were brought in and they make the driving experience just a little bit more comfortable. So you had aircon, you had power steering, which you'll see when we go driving, that's definitely something that was a welcome entry into the optional extras box. And then you had the electric windows as well. So essentially 3 nice little options. Now, of course, if you've ever been out in an S2, you'll know that I think it's from the S2 that power steering is fitted as standard, I believe. But on this example today, it's not been retrofitted, and of course it wasn't available at time of purchase. So you'll see here today exactly why they developed that power steering, because I don't think it's up until we get to around 30 miles per hour that you start to see the steering lighten up a bit. But remember, we're in the era of being chauffeur driven. It doesn't really matter. But what does it sound like? Well, shall we get it started up and I'll let you have a little bit of a listen. So we've got to lift this key to get it going. Well, of course it's quiet. It's a Bentley, it's not going to be really loud inside. And it was funny actually, because when the owner backed it out of the garage earlier, I was walking towards it, I thought, is it running? Is it running? It's so quiet from the outside. Let me show you, hold on. Gosh, this is a bit more luxurious than what we're used to, isn't it? Now, it's funny because when you take out cars of this era, quite often they are so loud inside. Whereas that 4887cc engine is just quietly purring away in the background. The seats are so luxuriously upholstered that it's more comfy than my chairs at home. It's not just a drive from A to B, it's an absolute experience. But I mean, you'd want it to be, because this was of course just shy of £5,000 when it was new, which is an awful lot of money for way back when. But my goodness, what a car it is, and it's held up so well as well, and it's a lovely example. There are no knocks, no bangs, rattles, there's no nasty smells inside, and pretty much everything is working as it should be. I think the only thing that's slightly errant is these wipers, which have decided today is not the day to be working, but hey, it's not too bad. Now you'll notice as I come down, I'm quite cautious about coming between vehicles, and the reason for that is I've got fairly good visibility, but this car is a lot wider than what I'm used to. This is just over 6'2" wide, which makes it one hell of a car. But you know what? You don't half get some respect on the road around here. Nobody's been up behind me flashing. Audi drivers, I'm looking at you. I've been given plenty of room on the road, and it's been, well, it's just been absolutely lovely to take out. Now, I talked about that heavy steering, but as you can see, it's not too bad. But in fact, this is a perfect time for me to talk about something else as we approach this red light, which is the brakes, because they are a servo assisted drum brake. Now, I know that people always say drum brakes, oh, drum brakes, but with that servo assist, which I think is driven off the back of the gearbox, the brakes aren't too bad once you've got the car running up to speed. Now, as we accelerate, I feel like all these situations write themselves today. I can remind you of what we do 0 to 60. So 0 to 60 in this thing is 13.1 seconds. But realistically, as you lazily travel around town, which is what we're doing today, you don't need to be worried about that. But you might be worried about your MPG. So I think it's 14 MPG in this, which it's not too bad, is it? It's not amazing, but look, when you're in a vehicle like this and you own something like this, your biggest concern is not the MPG. And this is also the perfect time for me to tell you where the indicators are, because I forgot to tell you that on the test. They're just up here on this discreetly placed switch. And another thing that I forgot to tell you actually when we were talking about the experience of being in this car and what it's like inside are those picnic tables in the back, because they're really nicely laid out. And would you believe it, if you wanted a cigar or a hand-rolled cigarette with your sandwiches that you've brought from home, you've got these natty little ashtrays as well. And one of the nicest things about this car is sometimes you get in cars and you can tell they've really been smoked in, whereas the ashtrays in this don't look used at all, and it doesn't smell like anyone's smoked in either, which for me is always a big plus point, because the smell of tobacco really does cling to leather and interiors and it can really ruin it. And as you can see, it's been quite a leisurely drive. I'm trying to think what else there is to tell you really. All in all, it's just an incredibly luxurious experience. It drives well. That steering, yeah, it's heavy, but once you start getting a bit of speed, I would say really from about 20 to 30 miles per hour, it starts to feel like a very balanced drive. All those concerns of that heavy steering when you're trying to maneuver at low speeds into spaces go, and you just have a thoroughly enjoyable driving experience that really you just relax. Because I think today, in today's modern world, all we do is stress, isn't it? Oh, got to do this, got to get that done, got to be here as quickly as possible. When you're in something as distinguished and luxurious as this Bentley, you just get to sit back, relax and enjoy the drive. And that's what I've done today. It's been good fun, it's been a lovely car to test, and if you're the next lucky owner of this car, you are in for an absolute treat. So if you've watched this video, remember, and you're thinking, oh, I quite fancy that, all the details are in the description box below. We've got something else coming next week, something British, something exciting, but before then we have got some midweek videos. So until next Sunday when we see another car review, or I see you midweek for something else, take care and drive safely.